Okay, so I'm here. Welcome to Rescuing Roy, by the way. In this episode, what I'm going to do is actually rebuild the carburetor. I've already made a start. I've already put the idle screws in. I've got a new rebuild kit. All of the old parts went through the ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, ultrasonic cleaner's arrived. It's a bit on the small side. Thank you very much, Amazon, for your wonderful descriptions of products. So it probably means I'll have to do this twice, because it'll only do half the body at a time, but that should be all right. It'll also give us an idea of how well it works. So yeah, I've got it set to warm up to 50 degrees. We'll give it 30 minutes and see what it does. It's quite annoying, at least. Yeah, it's going to sit and do that for 30 minutes. It might end up out in the shed. Right, that's had 30 minutes of extremely annoying buzzing at 50 degrees. Let's see if it's made any difference. I can actually kind of see a bit of a difference. And I've blown out all the passageways with my carburetor cleaner with a WD-40 nozzle put on the top, which allows me to get a straw to blow it all out. So I'm just putting on the anti-stall diaphragm here. Screw that down with its screws. Let's get all the screws started. And tighten them all up in sequence, because we don't want to warp anything. Don't need to drastically over tighten anything. We have a piece of tube that connects the anti-stall up to the car. That's a good start. Right, let's put the throttle butterflies in. So they've provided a handy exploded diagram here of the carburetor. So if we orientate it the same way as the diagram, then we can see what goes where. So we've got two accelerator shafts, two throttle shafts. This one has got, I put it all back in the same place, put everything together in the same orientation. See that off of that diagram. So these nylon sleeves go in to the throttle body. And we've got a return spring. Yeah, that's going to work like that. Then we have another sleeve, retaining spring. We just cinch that up. Now the throttle butterflies have got a bit of an angle on them. So we'll see straight away if that's the right way around. That's not. There we go. See, that throttle butterfly just sits nice and tight in there. And that's automatically centered it. So we can just drop the screws in that retain it. If indeed they are the right screws. It feels like they're not. Those definitely aren't. Okay, they're in nice and tight. We've got a throttle butterfly that's closing nice and positively. Okay, let's put the other one in. So the other one's slightly more complicated because it's got an adjustable mechanism on it. Again, I put it all in the right order. I took it out. We've got our 2 nylon sleeves going. That shaft complete with this little lever goes on there. And then again, consulting the exploded diagram. We've got the retaining washer, the spring. That's the idle speed, which slots on there. And a bearing. That needs to be meshed together. Like that. There are 2 little lines that need to be matched up on that. Throttle arm, locking washer, and the retaining screw. Oh, some bits missing. Got some bits of the choke mechanism as well there. So that sits like that. Just cinch that up. Now the next thing we need to do is there's an adjustment. There's an adjustable hole here to allow these plates to work in sync. So let's put the plates in. We'll plate it in. So that again has got an angle on it. So it's going to fit like that. Yeah, and this is what I noticed last time when I took it apart, that the idle speed is set so high it's not letting it shut. So let's back that idle speed off there. See if that lets, yeah, that lets that shut nice and firmly. Let's screw that in. Ouch! That screw is not the happiest. Let's give it some lubrication. Let's just see if we can pilot another screw through there to clear the thread out a bit. If that hadn't worked, I'd have stopped and gone and got my tap and die set and run a tap through it. That screw is really unhappy. Yeah. I'm not going to put that in for the moment. I'm going to take that and either replace it. I think it's a standard 4mm screw, so I think I've got some or I'm going to run a die over it and clear the thread out. In the meantime, it's in there with one screw, which is, it's not, you couldn't run it with it because it's now got a big hole in the accelerator. But that is now, both of those butterflies are closed, which means that's the exact position that needs to be in to set. I think that's the right screw for it. Yeah. So that's the correct position for it to be in to set that adjustment there. And that means that they open together and they shut together, and crucially, no, it's not adjusted properly. It's still not right. Because there is there's a hole down there that needs to be covered when they're closed. That's better. So that's now closing that little hole with the butterfly, which is what we want. They're both acting in unison. That's good. Right. So we can put the accelerator pump on now. So accelerator pump spring, diaphragm, the pump body. Yeah, so that's now working. That's working the accelerator pump like it should. Good. That idle screw can now be touched off on there. And again, it's half, 1.5 turns to get the car started. Right. What have we got in the kit? We have got a new accelerator pump valve. So looking at accelerator pump, we've got 2 washers and the pump valve. Wrong washer. So we've got a washer, another washer, and the jet, and the valve. That's loose. That's better. That's just bottomed out. Good. Okay, accelerator pump. That's the accelerator pump metering needle, which just goes in on its own. As we start replacing things, let's take them out of the old pile. Okay, then we've got our emulsion tubes. That's the bad one. One good one. One new one. And then the air corrector jets go over the top. We've got our power valve. That's not our power valve. This goes in the bottom of the float chamber with its washer. And we have the 2 main jets that go in there. putting those two main jets into the bottom of the float bowl. So we've got power valve, main jets, emulsion tubes and air correctors, and accelerator pump. Now the idle jets can go in. So these are the two idle jets. Let's do the big one first. So the big idle jet, we have a O-ring on it. Let's just make sure the O-ring isn't in there, which they're not. And there were two O-rings, big one and a smaller size one. And then the actual jet is that. And for a start, we thought that was blocked up, and it's also a 55. And it should be a 50 to be standard. So let's put a new idle jet in there. Let's do the same to the idle jet on that side. So O-ring. Take the jet out because it's a 55 and put in a 50. Oop. Spread the legs of that one slightly so it grips in the holder. There we go. Idle jets. What else have we got left? Lots of excitingness. So we've got that screw that needs to go into the throttle butterfly. I think that's the bottom done. So let's put the bottom to one side and start to look at what we've got in the top. So let's give it a clean out of all of its passages. There we go. Okay, we'll do the needle valve and the choke and the float last because they're delicate. So let's do the choke. So that's the choke, and then the choke plates. They slide in. Good, nice and tight. Encouraging, we're starting to run out of bits. So let's do the quick win fuel filter. That goes on there. Let's take the old one out of the pile. I was going to say I'd have expected a copper washer there, but doesn't seem to be one. Oh, there isn't one on the diagram either. It's a spline. It's a taper fit. Right, needle valve. So here's the new needle valve, which is those parts there. And there's a washer. Yeah, so there's the old needle valve assembly. We'll take that out and just cinch that up. Power valve. So this is a new power valve, and I was told to set it all up, and then there's a, there we go, so it's got it in loose, and then you push down on it, and there is a retainer that gets pulled out, and then you keep it under tension, or under pressure rather, when you do those screws up. I'm presuming that's so the gasket sits in the right place. And then once you've done the screws up and it's seated, you can let it go. That was a very useful note that Anthony put on the invoice. He just hand wrote it on a piece of advice there that was actually quite useful, and I can see why. Right, float time. Now this looked like it's had a hard life. So let's give it a bit of a straighten up. Of course, we've got this pesky pin here that was, it's now a lot freer since it's been in the ultrasonic cleaner. So put that in, that needs tucking under that little. I think if I'd have taken a harder look at that when I took it apart, I might have bought a new float. So we just hang that on there. That drops in there. Pin goes back in. Right. Now is the fun and games operation of setting that float. Directions for levelling the float. It is essential the following directions are complied with in order to obtain correct levelling of the float. Make sure the weight of the float is the correct one. The float the float can freely slide on the axis and doesn't show any pits. Good. Make sure the needle valve is tightly screwed into the housing and the pinball of the dampening device incorporated into the needle is not jammed, which it isn't. Keep the carburetor cover in a vertical position as indicated in the figure, since the weight of the float could lower the pinball. With the carburetor cover in the vertical position and the float clip in light contact with the pinball on the needle, the distance of the float from the upper surface of the carburetor cover must measure 38.5 millimeters. So that is when it is sitting like that, when it's just resting on it. After levelling has been done, check the stroke of the float is 10 millimeters. This requires a micrometer. I'll be back. Of course, I'm being a complete ignoramus. It's not a micrometer, it is a caliper, it's a vernier caliper. This one I bought about 400 years ago from the Middle Isle of Lidl, and its battery's running out by the look of it. So we're going to have to set it the old-fashioned way. Unless I've got one of those batteries. 38.5. 39, 38, 38 and a half. There we are. So that is 38.5. Resting gently on the pin. It's a bit high at the moment. That should be touching the bottom of that. So give it some downwards encouragement. Nearly. I'd say that's pretty spot on. Now we need to check it doesn't go more than 10 millimeters. 48.5. 50, 59, 48 and a half. So this is the full drop. Tiny touch too much at the moment, not by much. Let's check we haven't messed up the other one again. Yeah, that's made it sit just a touch too high. Beautiful. So that's the float height set. Back to the base. See if they're the right thread screws. They most certainly are. And I think what I'll do, so everything matches, is just change the other three, because then we've got nice new screws in there. These are better screws, they're brass, those are steel. Relatively confident that changing the other screws is the square root of nothing, but why not? Let's just back off this idle screw and check that the butterflies close nicely like they should. And touch off on the idle and half, 1.5 turns. Ventries, hole to the float chamber. Put those in the wrong way round and everything does work very badly. I can tell you that from experience in the 90s with a Ford Cortina. Thought so. Do you know, I thought about this when I was cleaning it. In there, this is supposed to have an automatic choke. So you have your automatic choke mechanism, but this has been replaced with a manual one. And this hole here is connected through to below the throttle butterfly, so it will suck air through that if it's left open. I think normally there would be an O-ring in it and the automatic choke mechanism would blank it off. But that's not happening anymore. That's going to cause an air leak. Can't leave that like that. That really would cause an air leak. That would be bad. Yeah. It's the vacuum port that normally would supply this vacuum assembly on the automatic choke, but that's not here anymore. So it can't just sit there. It needs to be blanked off. Otherwise, it's a massive vacuum leak. No wonder it wasn't running right. But there's nothing to blank it off. I wonder if that would work in the spirit of improvise and overcome. If that would do it. I can't leave it like that. I just can't. I mean, it's just mad. That would hold it on there. It's a complete bodge, but would be better than nothing. Top cover gasket. There's nothing being blanked off, is there? No. Good. Top cover, making sure we don't knacker the float. Screws in loosely. Okay, so now we can connect the automatic choke, or the non-automatic choke. So that goes up there. Which goes in there. Clips on there. Split pin goes back in. Yeah, so now we can see, if let's take this rubber out of the way so I don't fire it somewhere. That would have been the vacuum that goes to the automatic choke mechanism. If I blow some cleaner down there, we can see we are below the throttle plates. So if I just leave that open, there's going to be a massive vacuum leak below the throttle plates, which will completely unbalance everything. So it's got to be blanked off. Can't just sit there. Absolutely cannot just sit there. There are 3 screws that hold that on, and that leaves that blanking plate open. But this stinky little thing, which if you remember held the power valve down, this is meant to be thrown away. But I think it will repurpose beautifully under there as a little blanking shim. You can see by the colour of all these screws and things. This is a aftermarket manual choke kit. That's compressed that O-ring and should therefore blank that off. Let's put some pressure under it. Yeah, I'll live with that. That's what I love about old cars. When is it a bodge if it works? If that works, Roy will be much, much happier. Check the mechanism works. So we got choke plates, fast idles lifting up. We have a little tiny split pin to go in there. Hold that on. It's not opening that by much, but it's opening it a bit. The other thing I found on the car, there are two vacuum ports on this. That one there and that one there. That one there is for the distributor. Happy days. That one there is not used. But there was a vacuum pipe that was connected to the manifold and was connected to that. And that outputs above the throttle plates. So that was putting full manifold vacuum above the throttle plate, and then we got that hole on the side putting an air leak to the bottom. So life was not going to be happy. We've run out of parts apart from the top cover plate. Which I forgot to clean and now looks absolutely disgusting compared to the rest of it. So that can go in the ultrasonic bath. It's not needed to get the car moving, which is what I want. So actually we don't need to put that on. We just need to save its bolts. We can put that on later. We've got the gaskets that go on either side of the insulator, which is still on the manifold. And the manifold nuts are over on the car. There's this cork gasket, which I think I'm going to stick in the ultrasonic bath to give it a bit of a fluff up. We've got some bits left over from the kit here, which are to do with the automatic choke, which we haven't got. I think that's a rebuilt carburetor. And the thing that I quite like about it is that I found something. I found wrong jets, and I found that vacuum leak. So it's more than just trying to polish some functionality into it. I actually found a couple of credible issues that I fixed. So let's see how the car runs with that. Over to the car and let's see if it starts. Okay, so here we are back at the car. Let's put this carburetor on. So you have this spacer plate, which is like an insulator. It keeps the heat away from the carburetor. And that's why there are two gaskets in the kit. Now, you know how plastic always comes with a piece of protective plastic that you peel off? They didn't peel it off. Just everything about this car is like that. It's just daft, it really is. So we make up a sandwich. gasket, spacer plate gasket. That all goes on there. Not using any gasket sealant. I've got no reason to. And it's just something else that can gum things up. So, okay. Fail number one. I've got that bracket on the wrong way. Cinch that up. Okay, so that sits on there nicely. Let's put his nuts back on. Oh yeah. I've met this with carburetors before, where the nuts don't. You have to lift the carburetor up to get the nuts on the studs. And then you drop the nut and other such fun and games. Was a spring washer missing, so let's get a new one. Yep, I knew I would. Ah, brilliant. Gonna need a little tiny socket to get on that one. They always make these so hard to do. Correction, 45 years ago, they always made these so hard to do. Yeah, we're going to need a little tiny socket on that one too. Even that's a bit too big. Okay, that's the accelerator linkage. That's the vacuum advance. I made that special piece of tube to go over that redundant port that's not needed. It does actually foul on the idle screw. No, that's all right. That's okay. And the choke cable. Just make sure the choke knob is pushed in. It is. And the choke is fully open, so that's the right place for it to be. Right, fuel pipes. So, top one is the supply. And the supply on this car goes underneath. That's the return. Moment of truth time. So, there's no fuel in the float chamber. It's completely empty. So it's going to take a bit of cranking to get some fuel pumped up to it. We'll leave the choke off at the moment and just see if we can get it to fire. But it's going to take a fair bit of cranking, I would think, to get it to go. Okay, I can smell fuel now. So let's put the choke on.